yeah, Webflow is one of the bigger systems out there. 10 minutes isn't a huge amount of time to kind of cover with it. I'm going to use some cheats along the way. I will just start by telling you just a little bit about myself. I don't take myself too seriously. I have been working with websites for a number of different years, and I went fully freelance as a multidisciplinary designer at the start of April this year, so just not long into it. I will talk about the company I was working for just before that and the project I was doing there. But I do lots of different types of design. I split myself between Sage, which is me as a freelance designer, and another project which I'm doing. I am a bit of a jack of all trades. Here is a small collection of the jobs that I've had over the years and the things that I've done. The ones in bold and green in the middle are the ones that I am currently doing. So there is quite an overlap with website stuff and designs. But if you just go down to the bottom left, bar supervisor, I'm bored at a bar I was working at in Inverness. I was one of the supervisors there, and we didn't have a website. We were a new bar, so I built a website for the bar. And I've done that in various other positions as well. I've always found that communication through web is such a common thing. But for me, it started away from Webflow. So I use Weebly, Squarespace, and Wix. You might have heard of one or all of these. All sort of what you see is what you get, drag and drop tools. So really easy to use. Like you can knock something up in no time at all with all of them pretty much. So they're no code. You're basically going to pick from a range of templates that are available for you, and then you're going to start using that as much as you can. I say that in the past, I've also sometimes used these because if I wanted to pass a website on to somebody else afterwards, I want something that's easy for them to pick up. The caveat with that is that if you're going to build, design, or maintain a website, there's still a fundamental level of artistic and functional design and things to consider in terms of a UX point of view. So you still need to, you can't just give it to anyone and think that it's all going to be great. The number of times I've passed a website over to somebody and a few weeks later you look at it and you go, oh, Jesus, oh, what have you done? So it's always something to bear in mind. So, the drawbacks that I found with these is like, they're great for static content, which is you going and entering text and it's just going to stay there. But you can't get any dynamic content. So something that comes from a spreadsheet or a database, a CMS. You can only use the templates and wizards unless you get into creating that old stuff yourself, which gets really complicated. And there's a lack of customization available, including with responsive design. So that's when you're trying to make not just the desktop version, but your tablet both ways, your mobile both ways, and you certainly can't do anything for larger screens with them. So I always felt I was kind of pushing at the edges and I felt really stunted. In my previous role, I was a content design manager for the UK charity for shared transport. And this is their website, and it was a problem. So it was, first of all, I'm not dissing any platform here. I'm not saying Wix is bad, Squarespace is bad. I'm not saying WordPress is bad, but they all have their limitations, and Webflow certainly isn't without its own limitations as well. But this was their old WordPress site. It'd only been built a couple of years ago, but it just wasn't really fit for purpose. So it felt like it was constant bodge jobs to get it content up, and the developers stopped supporting it. I felt we were unable to make changes to fundamental stuff. So it was like, as a designer, I could never really get stuff looking exactly how I wanted it to. It was always very much within limitations. So I decided to try and turn that problem into an opportunity, given that I was being paid to come up with a new site. I said, I want to do this. And so this is what I've been used to. And in the past, I've worked with coders as a video games designer, and I've been around people, and I never could get the hang of it. I remember, it's weird, this came up with a conversation earlier. I remember looking at Joomla and Drupal and stuff years ago and trying to get something working. There was a lot of cussing. So I found in the middle ground of these Webflow, and I decided to try and get to know Webflow a little bit. To give you a bit of a sense as to what Webflow is, for those people who don't know it, I'm going to run a short video, which is Webflow, in 100 seconds. And hopefully the sound will come out of here.
Webflow is a no-code tool that lets you build jaw-dropping websites. Unlike website builders for dummies that generate bloated code or are frustrating for non-coders to customize, Webflow is simply a visual UI for coding, making the code cleaner and efficient, and the customization of design feel easy and familiar. You can add HTML elements like divs into a canvas and add CSS classes that include all of the CSS properties you're familiar with. So instead of writing a bunch of lines just to center an element, you can now simply click 2 buttons and the code just magically appears. This is also true for animations. Instead of having to write gazillion lines of code just to make your text slide into view, you can visually just adjust the speed and easing of animation to create some pretty fancy website. Webflow comes built in with a customizable CMS that allows you to build pages with dynamic content and a simple editor that allows your client to edit their content without ruining your design. This is a much better experience for your clients than something like WordPress. Not to mention, they don't have to update plugins and crash their own website. Webflow has other features like e-commerce capabilities, membership, and logic. But the one thing that Webflow does better than anyone else is making front-end development of website so much faster and accessible. You can either export your code or host and publish your website with Webflow in one click, and congrats, you have a new website. This has been Webflow in 100 seconds, a complete ripoff of Fireship's format, but you know what they say, good artists copy and give credit where credit is due. If you want to learn more about Webflow, check out our full courses and resources in the description, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
So full credit to you. That was Flux Academy, who's one of the great resources that you'll find on YouTube. There are lots of them, but those guys are really cool. So Webflow. So basically, it lets you work with code visually. Fundamentally, I thought you had a question there. Fundamentally, a website is a bunch of code. And, you know, as a no-code tool, it's just trying to convert that into such a way that it gives you all that power. So it's a familiar UI. It makes responsive design way easier. So like I was saying about different kind of platforms, you can even do 4K display and have things for that. 8K, customize it exactly as you want. Really great. It's got powerful tools to allow the creation of interactions and animations, which down to little things like just getting a button to move in a certain way when you go over it, to highlight in different ways. It's absolutely amazing how much you can do and how easy it is. It has a CMS. So that's God, I froze when I was doing this earlier. I was like, what's a CMS? Content management system. Sorry, I knew that was going to happen again. So it's very easy to design lots of pages at once. So if you're doing a blog, you can enter this, just design it once. It does it for all of them. But you can also use the CMS in lots of other ways. I am happy at the end of this to show you. I don't have time to do a demo or show you the stuff that I've done, but I can show you on one of the websites that I built just how I've used CMS in different ways and different pages as well. The one thing which I didn't say a second ago, which I meant to just before I started on this, is so it's really quick and easy to do drag and drop editors versus at the other end of the scale where you're coding. Webflow does have a learning curve, and it is not insignificant. I'll come to about that in a minute, but just something to kind of bear in mind that it is, it's a bit of work to get started, but I think it's well worth it. So, and it also, while there's that initial investment, it saves you time and money by bridging the design development gap. So you're not, so traditionally, like you're sending something off to a developer for a fancy website. You can, as a designer, I can just do stuff straight away. I get sent an edit to do by manager, like it can be on the site in minutes, something that would historically take, potentially, days, maybe a couple of weeks. It also closes the gap with content creators, allowing them direct access to make changes, as you saw in the video, to the actual content directly live on the site so they can see it in real time. And they can also update collection lists so that blog posts and the likes. And if you're working in a team, it allows much greater consistency in the design language that you're using, and keeping everything super consistent is really important when you're trying to maintain that brand. Software, everything's based in Chrome. It all just runs in the web, which is great. Automatically updates. It creates automatic site backups, and it has staging URLs as well. So at the minute, I'm working on a new feature, a mobility hub gallery for Como on their site, and I've just pushed a new version of that to the dev site so they can review it, be happy with that before we push it out to the main URL. The other thing to mention about Webflow, and if I had more time, I would show you some of this. They have the best training videos I have ever seen. So if you like dark humor, if you like a bit of Monty Python, you will get on fabulously with them. If you want to get a little glimpse of it, then search for Webflow Ryan Reynolds, which is one of their latest videos on YouTube, and you'll get a flavor for it. But it's super informative. It'll take you through an entire structure of how to design, as well as considerations when using it. Webflow does play with lots of different ones. Here's just a few of some of them from different categories. I will say as well as sort of playing with others, There are some amazing resources from the likes of FinSuite, who sort of provide extensions to use and little snippets of code that you can put in, which is amazing for like creating filters. And I've used various different ones on a website I'm going to show you in a second. So advice for getting started: learn Webflow, like really learn it. Don't go and try and build the site. Start first of all, give yourself time and actually properly learn it. The way I would do that is I would utilize the Webflow University courses and articles. So there's a couple of different courses you can do, but it will take you through. They'll give you all the resources to actually do it. So someone was asking before about a way of teaching other people to do it. As a designer previously, when designing 3D modeling, I've actually given people the SketchUp videos and said, work your way through this bit by bit and it'll give you all the resources. But say exactly the same about Webflow. Start with small builds. A mistake that I made was my first project was ginormous. But start with small builds. You are going to make mistakes, and it's much easier to kind of rectify those in there on a smaller scale. A big one is nailing naming conventions and the data-driven classes that Webflow uses. Again, this stuff all kind of comes into CSS, which we're not really here to talk about because there's no code. But naming conventions, there's a FinSuite have a great system called Client First, which I really wish I knew about. The first website I built in terms of naming conventions is something of a mess. It's been recorded, isn't it? You can fix that. The naming convention has room for improvement. So you really want to plan out your website and make use of components where possible for the benefit of clients when you're passing it on to them or you're using it in the future. Webflow has it's got lots of great resources online, but you can also go and get clonables. So I can make any site that I've built available for somebody to go in and view it. And you can go in and they can copy it. They won't edit my exact site. They'll just take a copy of it. But it means it's really easy for people to share little snippets for whole sites. And you can go in and you can learn from that, which is just fabulous. Build with accessibility in mind. Coming onto this. So I didn't do this right at the very start. I knew in the back of my head that I wanted to do this, but it has amazing tools for accessibility. And if you want to know more about development accessibility, the World Wide Web Consortium has a great little course that you can do about this, but it has all the functionality in Webflow for doing accessibility to the nth degree. It's amazing. QA your work thoroughly. You'll make mistakes. And staff your Webflow needs. So if you are looking to produce a Webflow site for your organization, just make sure it's not, like I said, you can, in the past, I've handed a website over to somebody and then a couple of weeks later, it's a mess. But, Webflow, you build sites with passing on in mind, but you're still going to need some support going forward. In the same way, previously you would have needed a developer. So it's just something to kind of bear in mind. So I kind of took the opportunity of that website. This is really poor PNG that's come out as it looked better over my screen. This is the Newcomer UK website. I did a complete rebrand of the charity at the same time. So the QR code will take to that. You'll see the phone version if you want to have a look at it, or have a look at it later. But it's fully accessibility sort of compatible, and there's so many different features that are in there. I'm happy to show anybody that afterwards. That is everything that I can squeeze into what is definitely more than 10 minutes, because I did say some extra things in there that I didn't practice. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's there, the QR code. My website is pretty much non-existent at the minute. It's just a holding page, which is in Webflow. Yeah, I'm happy to field any questions. And like I say, I've got my computer with me. I'm happy to show you Webflow in action. If anyone wants to do that afterwards, we can do that.